event tonight under the theme of Reimagining and Remaking America. My name is Valerie Kaur. We're just going to spend a moment welcoming you all into the room. I invite you as you come in to go ahead and put your name and where you're coming in from so we can say hello to you. We have a few thousand people registered for tonight's event. We're really, really excited to spend this hour with you. So I'm going to say hello to New Jersey, hello to Krista from Houston, Veronica from Marin County, hello San Diego, hello New York City, hello Pennsylvania, hi Los Angeles, I'm from Los Angeles too, hello Sunnyvale and Virginia and New Zealand, New York, Massachusetts, San Francisco, Portland, it's going by so fast now, Long Beach, Bay Area, Father James Manship from St. Rose of Lima Church. Hello, Father. Oh, I've missed you. Hi, North Carolina. Hi, New York City. Hi, Minneapolis. Hi, Mexico. Hi, Denver. Oh, just imagining all of you coming into the room. Yes. Hi, Buffalo. Hi, Iowa. Hi, Delaware. Hi, Fargo. Hi, San Diego. I see Shauna from Vancouver, Canada. I see Loveland, Colorado. I see Iowa and Washington. Wendy from Oregon. So as you're coming in, just put your name and where you're coming in from so we can say hello to you. Eric from Denver. Willie in Thousand Oaks, California. Melissa from Nashville. Lisa from Chicago. Kathleen from Oregon. Bend, Oregon. That was the last place I was at before this pandemic. Hi, Bend. Hi, Scottsdale, Arizona. Hi, Sydney, Australia. Hi, Lisa from Florida. Mark from Atlanta. Mary from Minnesota. Got some alliteration here. Pat from the Bay Area. Janet from Sacramento. Joan from Ann Arbor. Genia from Seattle. Cynthia from Oregon. Amazing. Hi, everybody. Just welcoming you all in as you're streaming in. I'm so grateful to be here with you tonight. My name is Valerie Kaur. And tonight is a very special collaboration. Tonight is a partnership between several different organizations. It is a night that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. And so before we officially begin, I'm just gonna say a word to thank our partners. I wanna thank Dream Corps. Dream Corps is an organization that's been committed to closing prison doors and opening doors of opportunity. It's made up of 3 initiatives. I want you all to check out their work: Cut 50, Green for All, Dream Corps Tech. And Dream Corps has really been an organization at the front lines of social justice, committed to working across lines of difference, even partisan lines, to fight for a future where every single one of us has dignity. And I'm so proud to say that I've been able to work alongside Dream Corps for the last 3 years as part of the Revolutionary Love Project, which is the second organization I'm thanking. The Revolutionary Love Project's team has been committed to producing stories and tools and mass mobilizations to root our justice work in the ethic of love. And along the way, we've been able to work with Righteous Babe Records, which is our third partnering organization. Righteous Babe, of course, Ani DeFranco's label. They've been committed to really producing music for the movement. And I really hope you all stay to the very end of tonight's session, because Righteous Babe Records and Ani has produced a song specifically for tonight, for this book, for this movement, for this moment, called See No Stranger. That comes at the very end of the night. And finally, I want to thank One World Literature. One World is an imprint of Random House. It's an imprint that is committed to becoming a home for authors who are challenging the status quo, subverting dominant narratives, and providing new language to understand the past, present, and future. I've been very honored to be an author at One World for the last 3 years, working with One World's editor-in-chief, Chris Jackson. And Chris Jackson has almost single-handedly created this community of authors who I really believe are presaging the world to come. And working with Chris, his brilliance, his fortitude, and his patience and dedication and vision, and pulling the deepest wisdom out of each of us as his authors, including out of me, it has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. So Chris, I'm so grateful that you're here tonight to moderate tonight's event. And I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Valerie. I'm really honored to be here for this first big event for See No Stranger, which, as you said, we've been working on together for a few years now. And the baby has arrived, which is very exciting. And also exciting is that tonight you're going to be in conversation, not just with me, but with A person who probably needs very little introduction to this audience, but Van Jones, the founder, board president of Dream Corps, social entrepreneur, CNN political contributor. He's written 3 best-selling books, including Beyond the Messy Truth, and I think we all know him well from CNN as well. So I'd like to welcome Van to the stage. And just once more to introduce Valerie, someone else who probably needs very little introduction here tonight. She's a civil rights activist, she's a lawyer, she's a filmmaker, and the founder of the Revolutionary Love Project. And as I said, I've been working with her now for 3 years. So I've been able to see all 3 dimensions of her brilliance, just as a writer, as someone who is a visionary about the world to come, and also someone who's incredibly perceptive about the world as it is, and also the world as it was, who's able to really trace the lines of history that brought us to this moment, and also just a beautiful human. So Valerie, welcome again. And it's so nice to be here with all of you. And I'm going to turn it over now to Valerie.
We thought we would begin tonight, a night where we're really trying to muster the energy and the courage to reimagine the world as it ought to be. We thought we would begin by naming the world as it is. And this is a difficult thing to do because it feels like our world has been changing so fast almost every hour, and all of us are just trying to catch our breaths. And so I want to begin by inviting you to notice what it is that you feel in your body in this moment. What emotions are you holding in your body? What images? What insights? What kinds of pain? And as I begin to try to give language to it, I invite you just to go ahead and, yes, you're already beginning, just write in the comment box what it is that you wish to share so that we can witness what it is that we're holding in our collective body. It was just a few weeks ago when so many of us saw George Floyd's public lynching. His voice is still echoing in my body, hearing him crying out for his dead mother, not 1 minute, not 3, but 5, 7, 8 minutes. And I can still see the fires in Minneapolis and in cities across America as so many of us felt this burst of outrage and pain and fatigue at justice still not being done. And then to George Floyd's name, we added the names of Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade and Nina Pop. And our outrage turned into energy as thousands of us, millions of us, risked our own lives during a global pandemic to flood the streets, demanding justice. We were met with tear gas and batons and flash grenades. We heard our president vow to use the military on his own people. And still we have new names. Rayshard Brooks, shot dead in a Wendy's parking lot. 2 Black men found hanging in trees here in the city of Los Angeles. The news is relentless. We're barely able to catch our breaths. And so I found myself cycling through grief and through rage and through fear and through trauma, and then just tiny glimmers of hope as I've seen what I never thought I would see in my lifetime. An uprising that has touched all 50 states and all corners of the world, of millions of people chanting that Black lives matter. So what is it that you are holding in your body in this moment? The first time that I left my house, I live in a neighborhood in Los Angeles where the National Guard moved in very fast, and there were helicopters overhead, the house shaking from the sound of the helicopters and the sound of popping noises in the distance as explosions went off and sirens going on through the night. And so my family and I, we stayed inside, 2 small brown children. I was afraid for the first time in my life in my own neighborhood. And I thought about the terror that many Black mothers have to live through every single day. And as I left the house for the first time, my son in the back seat, we saw National Guard rifles out in front of my son's preschool and in front of so many of the cafes where I worked on this book. And I was so afraid of my son looking at the men with the guns and having to try to explain to him what was happening in the world. He's only 5 years old. But my son had this look of astonishment as he was looking out the window. And I followed his eye line, and he was looking at pictures, graffiti of George and Trayvon and Breonna Taylor and BLMs with hearts all around them. And he looked at me and said, "Mommy, did you do this?" And because all he hears me talk about is love and justice in this household. And I said, "No, Gavi, we did this. We did this. What you hear your mommy talk about, there are actually millions and millions of people right now rising up in revolutionary love. We are grieving with each other. We are raging with each other. We are fighting with each other. We are breathing and pushing with and for one another in a revolutionary moment that I believe requires revolutionary language." And so I wrote this book for my own survival. As a civil rights activist, I didn't know how I was going to keep going unless I really learned how to practice, how to ground my struggles for justice and love. I wrote it for my own survival. And now I want to give it to everyone who is rising up right now, everyone who is breathless right now. I want this to be a tool for how to stay in the labor, because the labor will go on and on and on, even after this moment passes, even after November. This labor of turning our society into an anti-racist society, this is generational work. And so my offering, my deepest offering from my heart to yours, is to give this book in your hands as a way to stay, to love, and to last, to love and to last. And so I'm just going to read for a moment what you're all feeling in your collective body. I see grief and sorrow and uncertainty, hope and energy and confusion, grief, anxiety, speechlessness, hope, love, deep sadness, inner joy at the center. Can't take that away. Yes. Notice I feel like each of us carry within us the entire human condition, because everything that you are naming, I feel in my body. But I think if we're feeling it together and know that we're not alone in feeling it together, then we are strong enough to carry it and to bear it. So I witness each of you who are feeling all of this. And I want to tell you that you are brave enough to feel it and to move through it when we're in community like this.
Thank you so much for that. I think I'll just start off with a pretty simple question, Valerie, and I'd love for Van to also talk a little bit about what this moment means. But what does it mean for you that your book is coming out at this moment? You know, as I said before, I think your book does a wonderful job of tracing post 9/11 America up to this moment, and a wonderful job of looking ahead at what could be possible from this moment. But here we are in the moment. So what does it mean to you that your book is coming out right now with everything that's going on, everything you've already described?
You know, when I say I wrote this book as an act of survival, I really didn't know how I was going to last after this president took power in 2016. At that point, I had been a civil rights activist on the front lines of struggles for racial justice for more than 15 years. And I became an activist after a member of my own family community was killed, Balbir Singh Sodhi. He was the first person killed in a hate crime after 9/11. I was never planning to become an activist. It was a matter of life or death. I wanted to find justice in Balbir Sodhi's name. And so with every film, with every campaign, with every lawsuit, for the last, at that point, 15 years, I thought that we were making the nation safer for the next generation. And come 2016 and hate crimes skyrocketing once again, white nationalists called that year their Great Awakening. And at that point, I had become a new mother. My son was so little in his crib. And as I put him to sleep each night, my heart was just breaking, Chris. I thought, what was it all for? Wasn't wasn't it to try to make the world a little bit safer for him, and to know that he was growing up in a nation more dangerous for a little brown boy with long hair who may someday wear his hair in a turban as part of his faith, to know that he was growing up in a nation more dangerous for him than it was for me, or even for my grandfather when he arrived a century ago. I didn't know if I was going to last. And I was given a gift that few women who are mothers and activists are given. I was given time off and a room to think, a room of my own. Chris, you gave that to me. You saw me and said that I had something worth saying, some wisdom worth consolidating and pressing into pages. And so I poured through the stories of my life and the stories of the sick faith and the stories of social movements before us in order to write this book. And I began to see patterns of how people lasted when the struggle is so long, when the labor is so endless. And I began to call it revolutionary love. So I'm back now. I'm back in the struggle now. And I know that I will last because I have found these practices, which is not just my wisdom, it's just ancient wisdom, all consolidated. I found a way to stay in the struggle when it is rooted in love, when it is anchored in love. It's not only how we birth the nation to come, it's how we last. So what it means for me to put out this book in this moment is like the deepest offering I could make to anyone who is trying to figure out how to last.
And Van, I wonder also, just with your work right now in this moment, Valerie talks about love and connection and feeling together through this. Have you seen in these moments, and even in your kind of work in the media and reaching and touching people, sort of the value of love and connection in a moment like this? Oh, I think your mute might be on.
Good. Well, I mean, the short answer is yes, but we're not even halfway through 2020. There's still more 2020 ahead of us than there is behind us, and we've already had an impeachment, plague, pandemic, curfews, riots, quarantines, murder hornets, UFOs. I mean, literally, like the US government says they're UFOs. They didn't even make the news because there's so much stuff that's been going on, and we're still not even halfway through. And so, okay, somebody says actually, okay, so we're halfway through, fine. 2 days ago, somebody's good at math. I'm not good at math. From a month point of view, we still got more than 6 months to go. So what I would say is that we need some guidance. I think we need some guidance. I've seen people sadder than I've ever seen people, madder than I've ever seen people. Somehow in the middle of people risking their lives to march in a pandemic and a plague, it's more joyous than I've maybe ever seen people. We're on some kind of weird world historic pivot point roller coaster thing that we will know more in 10 years about what's happening right now than we know right now. We're breaking into something. And we need a North Star. And I think that what Valerie is offering is that. I would encourage people to look at this book. A lot of books are coming out right now that are hitting on this question around race, white fragility. Everybody should get, of course you can't, they've sold out, get it on Kindle. The New Jim Crow, documentaries like The 13th, Eyes on the Prize, parts 1 and 2. People are rushing toward this because that's really where the breakdown is most obvious. But this is not just a racial problem. It's not just a political problem. It's not just a legal problem. It's not just a policy problem. It's a spiritual problem. It's a spiritual problem. And a revolution is a change of heart first. That's what a revolution is. It's when millions of people have a change of heart about who counts, about who matters, about who belongs, about what's important. And it's out of that change of heart that then you have a change of law and a change of economy and a change of movement. But it's that change of heart that's required. And right now, I think we were in real danger of becoming what we've been fighting. We were in real danger of not just feeding what we're fighting by trying to return hate for hate and division for division and anger for anger, as if we could out divide the dividers or out hate the haters. That's not, we're not good at that stuff. And part of the sad thing is, and I don't mean to insult anybody on this call, but hopefully we're all friends here and I can say this. You suck at hating people. You're just not good at it. You've been trying for 3.5 years. You've been trying to be hateful, and it just exhausts you. You're not good at it. It's making you miserable. We're just not going to win that way. But we needed somebody to come along who has suffered the way that Valerie has suffered, who's vulnerable the way that she is as a woman of color, who's a religious minority in Trump's America, to come forward with something beautiful and something true and a way through. And that's what she's done. That's what she's done. And it's a miracle in a way. It's a blessing in the middle of all this to have somebody say something that's beautiful and true. And that's different. There's a feminist, womanist kind of power and reimagination of revolutionary struggle throughout. When she talks about labor, she's not talking about guys with hard hats. She's talking about pushing out babies. That's a different kind of thing. Okay, so you're dealing with a new paradigm, a return in some ways. It's a return. It's a renewal. And so I just want to take this moment, to thank you, Valerie. I really appreciate you. And a book this profound it takes a while. It takes a while to dissolve on the tongue, This is not just 3 steps to make America great, it's not that. It's something much deeper than that. And it's a real blessing to have it. So.
Van, I'm deeply grateful. There was a moment when I was in the middle of chapter 4, when I realized that in order to talk about rage as a part of love, I had to tell stories that I did not think I was going to tell. And I went to my husband, who's more private than I am, and I said, in order to really talk about what it means to harness rage, I'd have to tell XYZ stories. And he said, I was waiting for him to censor me. I was waiting for him to draw the bright line. And he said, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And after you write it, you come back to me and we'll decide what stays in and what goes out. And so I did it. And I did things I'm not supposed to do. I talk about my body. I talk about my family. I talk about surviving and healing from police brutality and sexual assault. I talk about sitting with white supremacists and prison guards and soldiers and my own abuser, and mustering the courage to love. And I talk about these things because the political is personal and the personal is political. That when we talk about being an anti-racist, it's not an intellectual exercise. When we are practicing revolutionary love, there is no way to be a bystander. And revolutionary love is an orientation to life that is personal and political. It is a way of moving through the world. It's a way of inviting people to see no stranger, even yourself, even your own body, in a world that wants to make you strange to yourself. To love in all directions, yourself and all you encounter, is to remake and reimagine the world around us, including the institutions that we move through. And so when people were saying, oh, Valerie, this is a brave book, I said, you know, it wasn't so brave when I was writing it because I just was told to tell the truth. So I told the truth. The brave part is now. The book is out in the world for 48 hours. And I am just hoping and praying that that mustering of the truth was worth it. And I hope, brother, that you are correct, that it is received in the way that I wish to give it, that it is a North Star for people trying to find their way in a time like this.
Yeah. So, you know, you said you said many interesting things there, but there's two things that I think might be interesting just to think about for everyone here, particularly people who are new to the book. So you have two words in the title, revolutionary and love. And these are two words that mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And I think one of the real powerful things about the book is the way you make us rethink these words that are so commonly used that, you know, they almost have lost all meaning. So can you just tell us, because, you know, when Van was talking, it made me think a lot about, you know, Dr. King's speech around Vietnam, where he was saying that, you know, we need a revolution in this country of values in order to outpace, you know, the technological changes and the urge toward war that we're sort of racing against, you know, our own obsolescence. But when you say revolution, what do you mean? And when you say love, what do you mean? These are very big questions, but maybe you can help us through it a little bit.
So I'm a lawyer. So anytime people said love is the answer, I would roll my eyes. I would get really upset because it's all about thoughts and prayers and good feeling. And I discovered when you sent me away, Chris, to write this book, that love, the problem is not with love in this country. It's the way that we talk about love. And when I sat in that rainforest to write this book, I was returning to my first lessons about love from my grandfather. When I was a little girl growing up on the farmlands of California, my grandfather would scoop me up in his arms after I was, you know, a kid calls me a black dog in the schoolyard, and I come home and I'm crying, and he tells me stories of the Sikh faith, and he tells me the story of the Guru Nanak, the very first teacher of the Sikh faith, the founder of the Sikh faith. And he talks about how Nanak was so distraught by the violence around him that he disappeared by a river, and he had a revelation. Nako beri nahi begana. Nako beri nahi begana. I see no enemy. I see no stranger. We are called to look upon the faces of anyone around us and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. And my grandfather would say, love is dangerous business. In this country, they say, I love you, I love you, I love you, all talk, no action. But love, if I choose to see you as my brother, George Floyd brother, Breonna Taylor sister, if I choose to see you as my brother, sister, then I must be willing, I must be brave enough to let your grief into my heart. I must be angry with you and for you. When you are facing an onslaught of injustice, I must be willing to fight for you when you are in harm's way. And so the Sikh ideal was always the warrior sage, Sant Sipai, the sage warrior. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It's a path of revolutionary love. And I think that is my contribution to the conversation about race and justice in America. How do we, as a Sikh, I'm pulling from the wellspring of my faith to say love was always dangerous. And when we love like that without limit, then it becomes revolutionary. And so I believe that revolution doesn't just happen in the big, grand public moments. It happens when people come together to practice a new way of being in the world. And my hope is that everyone who's waking up right now to the fact of injustice and racism around them is willing to start to cultivate a new way of being in the world. And that's where revolution will come in 25-year cycles, when the number of people of color will outnumber the number of white people in 25 years. For the first time in America's history, we are at a crossroads. You know, will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war? Or will we birth a nation that has never been on the face of this planet? Multiracial, multi-faith, multicultural, where we strive to protect the dignity of every single person. That's what's at stake. And with climate change, we're running out of time. So this is our moment. This is our generation. This is our time to figure out our role in that long labor to save not just our country, but the future of humanity. And if we're going to last, we've got to do it with love and through love.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the component parts of love, as it's described in the book. Love can be grieving with each other. Love can be raging with each other. Love can be imagining with each other. So at a moment like this, as Van said, he's never seen sadness like this before.
Yeah.
And this is open to both of you to answer. How do we grieve together in a moment like this?
Van, I'm going to read a few lines from the book, and then you're going to answer the question of how, okay? So this is from the chapter called Grieve. America does not know how to grieve Black lives, because doing so would mean accepting that there was never complete abolition. Slavery transmuted into segregation, which morphed into discriminatory laws, and now into policies that appear neutral on their face, but still disparately violate people of color. New horrors keep arising from old impulses. The past keeps bleeding into the present. A nation that cannot see its own past cannot see the suffering it has caused, suffering that persists into the present. A nation that cannot see our suffering cannot grieve with us. A nation that cannot grieve with us cannot know us, and therefore cannot love us. But there have always been people who did what the nation as a whole did not. America's greatest social movements were rooted in the solidarity that came from shared grieving. First, people grieved together. Then they organized together. There are always people who rushed in to bury the dead, to cut down the lynching noose, or attend the memorials to say, "Not in my name." When people who have no obvious reason to love each other come together to grieve, they can give birth to new relationships, even revolutions.
Wow. That's really interesting also in light of, Van, what you were just saying about even the film that you ran across today. Like, the opportunities we've had certainly to grieve have been many, but it's an interesting question how we can do that together and what power there is in that.
Yeah, I have kind of arrived at an appreciation for the perspective that Valerie is sharing. I didn't start where I am now. I mean, I think about myself in my 20s, angry young man, radical, militant, anti-capitalist, Black nationalist for a little while. I mean, really, and really mad at the system and ready to see the whole thing come down, just with the assumption that no matter what happened, it would be better than what I was seeing, on the streets of Oakland. And people talk about, a failed economic system in the Soviet Union. And I was like, we got a failed economic system in Chicago and Detroit and Philadelphia and every place I see Black people. So I'm not scared of those labels and those words. I just want the truth. I just want freedom. I want liberation for people who are oppressed. And it takes a while. It took me a while to realize that I couldn't bear the burden of that much anger and still be able to be useful to anybody. When I became a father, suddenly I'm looking at this, as Valerie was talking about, looking at this little bitty guy, just like a burrito-sized person. And I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this dude? And also suddenly, this country I'm talking about tearing down, he's got to grow up in. And how's that going to work? I mean, how are we going to make this work? I mean, suddenly I go from, F the system to fix the system. I want my kid to grow up, in a place that can work for him. And that began a long process for me. And what I would just say about this whole thing is I've arrived at a place, at least in myself, I think, where I want freedom for everybody. And that's not just an inversion of Black people are on the bottom and now we need to be on the top, or white people separated themselves from us, we got to separate ourselves from them, or whatever. Like, freedom is hard. But I can see the unfree. I can see how unfree white people are. But watching white people go through this thing that they're going through, saying that they're shocked and didn't know. Do you know how small you've had to shrink yourself to not know? I'm a ninth generation American. I'm the first person in my family born with all my rights. My mother and my father were born and married in segregation. This wasn't 1,000 years ago. My mother and my father. So we're living in a country where, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. And yet, in order to just continue to enjoy life, you have to not look. And when you don't look, you don't learn. And when you don't learn, you don't grow. And when you don't grow, you shrink. And when you shrink, you're smaller than you're supposed to be. And so all of us are walking around as little pygmies, little tiny Lilliputian-sized versions of the giants we were born to be. And the only way we're all going to get a chance to be giants is for us to tell the truth in love, but the truth, and to set each other free from all of this bondage. And I mean, it's been amazing to me, because one thing I know people like, well, I need help to teach me, Van, teach me about race. I'm like, Google is a powerful tool. Y'all learn stuff fast all the time. I mean, if a new cryptocurrency comes out, all my Silicon Valley friends, they learned about it on Monday. They're experts by Friday. My white friends learn stuff quick. God forbid if there was something, if something happened to one of our kids, if one of our kids had, God forbid, some rare form of cancer. If you found that out on Monday, by Friday, all of us would be world-class experts on that form of cancer. We'd have read every book. We'd have looked at every YouTube video, talked to every expert. We'd be bossing the doctors by the time you got to Friday. And so in the information age, ignorance about any topic is a choice. It's a choice. And why were you making that choice? Out of fear. It's the opposite of love. And so as we begin to move from fear-based choices to love-based choices, information turns out to be quite abundant. And not just data, but also wisdom, because the stories are quite abundant. And you can find them all over the internet and every place else. So, but the key is what Valerie is trying to do. She's going into where it's hard with this formula of breathe and push. Breathe and push, both. See, there's deep humanity in that. It's recognizing the pain of the struggle and the rest in the struggle and the cyclical nature of it. This gives us a different metaphor and a way to be in this thing and to get someplace. But I just want to say the key to the whole thing is love. I mean, if 20 years ago, if somebody said that to me, I'd have rolled my eyes and walked away. But I'm telling you, at this point in my life, the key to the whole thing is to move from fear to love. And it's in love that we can learn. It's in love that we can listen. It's in love that we can grow. And it's in growing we can get stronger. And as we get stronger, we have the ability, capacities to create things and to make miracles that we didn't know we had. And suddenly we were able to find more freedom for everybody. And so I just appreciate all of the things that Valerie is doing in this book. And if you have not bought the book, buy the book. I'm just gonna say, I've been Black my whole life. If you don't ask, you don't get. So nothing good happens to Black people accidentally. So we have to learn how to ask and get and try. And I'm gonna tell you, get this book. Order the book, order some copies of it, because you're gonna wanna be able to share it. Get this book and read it and nurture it in yourself, because we are going to need you to have this book inside of your heart as we move forward to change this country.
Yeah, I completely concur with that final sentiment. And, Van mentioned an interesting thing about these feelings of anger that he had at various points in his life. And I think we can all relate to that. And Valerie, I know that rage is actually, surprisingly, a part of love. Can you explain that?
I remember the moment that my son was placed on my chest, and I had that rush of oxytocin flooding my body, and I was like sobbing and shaking, and like, here's I'm falling in love. I'm falling in love. And I look at my mother, and she's opening up her bag and taking out the doll and Joel and getting ready to feed me, like feeding her baby while I was feeding mine. And I looked at my mother and I realized, like, oh, she has never stopped laboring for me from my birth to my son's birth. She knew what I was just waking up to, that love is more than any one feeling. Love is labor. It is fierce and bloody and imperfect and life-giving. It's a choice that we make over and over and over and over and over again. And anyone who's done the work of caregiving, whether it's parents or friends or your own children, you know that love is not just one emotion. You get mad sometimes. Love is all of the emotions, right? Joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Rage is the shield of love. Anger is the force that protects that which is loved. It took me a long time to learn this as a woman of color. I was always taught to suppress my rage in the name of love and forgiveness. Don't show your teeth, be polite, keep your head down, don't make waves. And it was honestly, it was, you know, my mother's here, and I tell the story in the book. It was my mother who, when I finally broke my silence, when I had my Me Too moment in my own family, and I broke my silence in a way that you're not supposed to break your silence. And my mother was the one who stood between me and the rest of family and said, with rage in her eyes, and said, "Not my daughter, let her tell her truth. She will be free." I never seen that kind of rage before. And that rage, anger, is the biological force that protects that which we love. It taps into our fight impulse. And only once I learned how to tap into my fight impulse could I begin to release the fullness of my power and my creative energy in the world. And Audre Lorde says that anger is loaded with information and energy, that we must listen to it like a symphony, that once it's on the outside of us, you know, the key is not to suppress it or to let it explode. The key is to release it into safe containers, and through crying or weeping or shaking or sweating or art or music or screaming, whatever it is, to be in relationship with it means then that we can harness it in all of our creative endeavors, in all of our movement building, our activism, and all of our truth telling. So it took me a long time to learn how to work with my rage, just like it took me a long time to learn how to work with my grief. And my invitation into practicing revolutionary love is really to be brave with our emotional bodies, to learn how to move through these emotions, knowing that our feelings will wax and wane, they will ebb and flow. And whenever we feel like we've reached our limit, wonder is the act that returns us to love. When I'm sitting with my uncle's murderer, which we did when we reached out to him in prison, when I'm sitting with him, every feeling in me is telling me to run away. I'm feeling with so much disgust. It becomes a conscious act to wonder about him, to ask the question why. And that act of asking why is my loving act towards him. Because in that moment, I'm not seeing him as a monster. For so many years, I saw Bobir Uncle's murderer as a monster. But in listening to him and doing that long, hard labor of listening to him, to see him as a human being, I learned that there were no such thing as monsters in this world. There are only people who are wounded, who are frail and complex and wounded, who participate in oppression out of their own blindness or their own anxiety or their own insecurity or their own greed. And once I do that, Chris, then I am released of any power that they have over me. Loving my opponents, wondering about my opponents enough to listen to them, is not a moral act, just a moral act. It is a strategic act. It is a pragmatic act. It is how I gain the information about the cultures and the institutions that radicalize them and authorize them. I am fully invested in removing this president from power in November. I am more invested in changing the conditions that put him into power in the first place. And so that's what this framework allows us to do. to think about there may be some opponents in our life that we are not, as soon as you think of an opponent and your body is flushed with rage or terror, this is not the time to wonder about them. Your loving act is to take care of yourself and let others do that act of listening with them. And I think a lot about our white allies right now, the white people that Van is naming who are waking up right now. I think it's time for white people who are waking up right now to give whiteness a new meaning. For too long, whiteness has been synonymous with dominance or with blindness or with oppression. But what if this generation could give whiteness a new meaning so that we're moving from allyship to accomplices? We need white people to become accomplices who conspire with us to break these chains of oppression. And that kind of labor is long and it's hard. And it requires moving through so many different kinds of emotions. But if it is marked by love, or we're doing it with love and through love, then that's how we can stay breathing and pushing together.
Yes. And just first, I just want to say to the people who are here, if you have any questions, we'll have time for one or two in just a moment. I did want to ask one more question of Valerie, though, because we've talked about grief, we've talked about rage. But as I said before, I think the book is one of the real insights of it is it doesn't just bring us to this moment and talk about this moment and how we can see the moment more clearly, but how we can imagine together something better. And how does that process work? Imagine is an act of love.
Yeah, so reimagine is another chapter in the book, another core practice. And so I'll read this piece to you all. The greatest social reformers in history did not only resist oppressors, they held up a vision of what the world ought to be. Nanak sang it, Muhammad led it, Jesus taught it, Buddha envisioned it, King dreamt it, Dorothy Day labored for it, Mandela lived it, Gandhi died for it, Grace Lee Boggs fought for it for 7 decades. They called for us not just to unseat bad actors, but to reimagine the institutions of power that ordered the world. Any social harm can be traced to institutions that produce it, authorize it, or otherwise profit from it. To undo the injustice, we have to imagine new institutions and step in to lead them. I believe that each of us has a role in reimagining the institutions that order our lives. I believe that, yes, we must be in the streets holding the signs, calling for police reform, calling for the bills to be passed, calling for us to relook at criminal justice as a whole and policing as a whole and public safety as a whole. And I'm so invigorated by how our movement has moved from resistance. Remember, after this president was elected, we were known as the resistance. And I thought, yes, resistance is important for our survival, but if we are only resisting, we're not actually producing anything new. We're not actually remaking the world. And now this moment, I see so many of us being willing to reimagine, dismantle police departments, move funding around, rethink policing as we know it. So this is exactly the work that we ought to be doing as a nation. But what happens when we come back from the streets? We go back into our families, go back into our homes, go back into our schools and our workplaces and our industries. There is no institution in the United States right now that does not need us to be in it, to transition it, not just in the coming months, but in the coming years, in the coming decades. All of us have a role in that work. And that is such long labor that this is why I hold fast to the wisdom of the midwife. She doesn't say breathe once and push the rest of the way, right? She says breathe and then push and then breathe again, my love. When you found me, Chris, for 15 years, I was only pushing. I was so burnt out when you found me and you gave me a little bit of money and said, here's your advance, go and think for a year and come back with some wisdom. And that year was like the first deep breath I ever got. And I began to create this framework of like, oh, okay, how do I keep breathing and pushing? Because I want to grow old. Like I want to grow old with the both of you. I want to last in this labor. So this call to revolutionary love, it's not just how we move through our grief and our rage, it's how we begin to reimagine the world to come and then last long enough to be able to labor for it.
Really beautiful. Okay, we have just a couple of quick questions from the audience I'd like to throw out there, and I think they're very relevant to what we were just talking about, what you were just talking about the future. So one of the attendees here had the question about, how do we, it's interesting that both of you spoke about how the birth of your children was one of the things that sort of began to make you think differently about the world. But going back to your younger selves, 20-year-old Van, 20-year-old Valerie, how do we enroll more of our youth who feel betrayed and are angry? And for your 20-year-old self, what would have been the best way to reach you with this approach at a time when you were thinking about the world in a different way?
There's nothing anybody could have said to me when I was in my 20s that would have made a difference, because I'd already seen so much. But somebody did show me something. I met the woman I now call my godmother, Dottie Zellner, who was the last white woman that was booted out of SNCC when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the group of kids who went south and registered voters, and some of them got killed in the 60s, they turned Black nationalists, and they booted out all the white kids. But the last white kid they booted out was a woman named Dottie Zellner. She was so down that the Black folk didn't want to kick her out. They were very sad. It was like, we want to get rid of all the white folk except her. So I met her in the 80s when I guess she's about my age now, but she seemed very old to me then. I was a law student. And she planted some seeds in me by how she was being. She was showing me that you could have interracial solidarity and that you could fight in a different way. Like my big slogan is #FightDifferent. And a lot of that came out of my conversations with Dottie, but it wasn't her bossing me and trying to preach at me. She was going out there and doing stuff with a different heart and showing a different heart and acting in a different way. And then I met a woman, I've met so many people, but I've met people who made me take a second look at myself, because what they were doing was so beautiful. The way they were doing it was so beautiful. The way they spoke to people was so resonant. I was like, they're working some magic here that I don't have. And and I put Valerie in that category. She's working some magic here that most of us don't have yet, and she's trying to help us get it. And she's still learning. She's early in her process. She's got many more books in her, but this is gonna be a major event. This book, a big part of 2020. My friend Michelle Alexander, I've known her since we were teenagers. When her book came out, The New Jim Crow, her book and my book came out the same. Her first book and my first book came out the same year, and my book was an instant bestseller. It was The Green Collar Economy. It's in 6 languages, 100 U.S. universities past year, translated, and there's a little phrase in there called the Green New Deal that seems to have some force and some life to it. And then it kind of had its moment and peaked and went away. Michelle's book came out, nobody cared about it. But The New Jim Crow was such a profound statement about racial injustice and where we were as a country that that one book has changed the conversation, and it crawled up onto the bestseller list, and it's never left in 10 years. A big part of what's happening in the country right now is because of that book and people who read it. I expect that from See No Stranger. I expect that. I think it's that kind of a book. And but somebody like me, the book wouldn't have made the difference. What would make the difference? Somebody who read the book and then started acting differently and showing beautiful results, and that would have been the only way to move me.
Valerie, 20-year-old Valerie.
I was a little older than 20, but I was a kid in law school when I first met Van Jones. I was in law school and I didn't want to be there. I wanted to give up. I wanted to quit. I said, this is, I thought I was going to justice school. Remember you came and gave that keynote and you said, you all thought you were going to justice school. Well, guess what? The language of law is a language of power and it wants to colonize you, but your job is to protect your moral imagination. And Van, you embodied it. You embodied it. You embodied love and justice together when you were on that stage. And I think I got to shake your hand. I was so excited. And then you embodied it as you left and was out in the world as a battlefield, still wielding love and justice in your heart. I mean, you have just embodied it. And I remember you calling me while I was in the rainforest trying to write this book. And I said something to you, Chris, earlier today, when my faith fails, I have faith in your faith in me. That's how I felt about both of you, the role that you played in my life. And I think about us being able to play that role in the lives of young people right now. And so I would just give them one world books. Chris, every book that you've published, I'd give them Michelle's book and Brian Stevenson's book and Ta-Nehisi's book. And Van, I don't think, your publisher is different, but I would give them Van's book too. And this book, it's to show them these authors and these stories that embody it so that they feel it, not just, they don't carry it here, they feel it here. And then can keep going.
All right. Well, I also would co-sign that sentiment. And we'll have maybe one more question we can, I think, ask from the audience. One of our listeners says, I live in a so-called purple state, but I'm in a deep red region. The people around me I know are good people, but how do I start a conversation with them about revolutionary love?
Can I say something?
Please.
I spent a lot, I'm from a red state. I grew up in Tennessee on the edge of a small town. The first thing, just give them the book. That'd be a great way to start the conversation. Order the book and give it to them and say, what do you think? And then that would be great. But I think that we miss a lot of opportunities with our conservative sisters and brothers. I've never seen a bird fly with only a left wing, not even in Berkeley, California. I've never seen a bird fly with only a right wing. Not even in Mississippi. A bird takes two wings to fly, and we actually do need each other. I think sometimes we have a colonial view, a colonizer's view of the red part of our country. That it's some sort of heathen backwater full of ignorant savages who need to be civilized. They need to be converted to the NPR religion. Okay, they need to be force-fed some kale and, fixed, and then once they've been fixed, then they can join the community of civilized people. That is a colonial view. That's a colonizer's gaze and agenda. And I think that helps the worst of the right wing, that contempt, that disrespect, that lack of curiosity. And so my view is that the left believes in justice. We don't like little people getting run over by big people. The right wing believes in liberty, limited government, at their best, limited government, individual rights. Turns out justice without liberty is a nightmare. If you just want social justice and you don't care about anybody's individual rights or liberty, you wind up with totalitarianism, government domination, state domination of the people. And it's a nightmare. And that was a big lesson of the last century, that the quest for social justice with no concern for individual liberty is a nightmare. The big lesson for the new century is, if you just care about liberty, individual rights, me, myself, and I, let the market do whatever it will, and you don't care about justice and the little folks, you get corporate domination. You get a different form of tyranny. And that's a nightmare too, because then the corporations buy everything, including your government, and then you're really screwed. And so it turns out that justice without liberty is a nightmare. Liberty without justice is a nightmare, which means the kids are still the smartest ones, because they say they want a country with liberty and justice for all every morning. They're smarter than the rest of us. They are correct. We need each other. And so if you start with respect, your role is important. I don't want you to be my president. But I want your party to be in opposition, but I don't want them to be in oblivion. I want you to be in the I want to have to argue with you. You'll make my ideas better. I'll make your ideas better. We need each other. Now, I'm gonna vote against you, but I respect you. That creates the opportunity for any kind of any conversation that you want. I will say this: when I'm in red parts of America, and the last time I went to jail, I wasn't marching with Black Lives Matter. The last time I went to jail, I was marching with coal miners who were trying to get their pension and their health care back from coal companies that had stolen, and we won that fight. I spent a lot of time in red parts in Appalachia and red parts of Pennsylvania working on criminal justice reform, addiction issues, opioid issues. And when I walk into a room as a Black guy who worked for President Obama, and I'm now on CNN, and I'm looking into the face of a couple hundred or a couple thousand white Trump supporters, I just say from the very beginning, let's just acknowledge that you probably think I'm mad at you. You look at me, Black guy, Obama, CNN, you probably think that I'm mad at you. And you're right, but not for the reasons that you think. I'm mad at you because I need you. I'm mad at you because I cannot have the country that I want without you. I'm mad at you because I know you. I know how good you are. You've got great families. You've worked hard. You've learned a trade or a skill, or even started a business. You're great neighbors. You're great people. And in this state, you got kids going to bed hungry every night. You got kids that have never seen their father because their father's in prison or in a grave someplace. And those kids need you, and they're American kids. And where the hell have you been? Where the hell are you? And not only do those kids need you, you need those kids. You need those kids and their parents. And you know you need them. And yet you're hiding over here and we're hiding over there. I'm mad at you because I need you. What can we do together to help those kids and to help you so we can get where we're going together? And I'm telling you, those guys would follow me into machine gun fire. And I walk with them too. There is a way out of this, but we have to take responsibility on our side for having shown too little love and too much fear from our position. Of course, the DACA kids were terrified. Thank God the Supreme Court did something good today. Of course, Black youth are terrified. Of course, we all have reasons to be fearful. But we don't have a monopoly on fear. People on the other side wonder, can I be a white Christian guy and be accepted? Am I so corny? Am I so offensive that nobody's gonna want me? Is somebody gonna crush my rights? You say, well, that's ridiculous. How can those people feel that way? They feel that way. They feel that way. And so this love ethic is something that we all have to keep growing into. And so, I cannot tell you how important Valerie's voice is and her book is, because I tell you, give that book to those guys and those women in the red parts, but with respect and love, and watch the magic that it does.
One of my favorite parts of the book actually is, Valerie, the way you kind of grapple with some of what Van is talking about. Like, how is it that we can reach other people, but reach it in a way that is both effective but also, honors the distance that we have to reach and what has to be overcome and what responsibilities lie on each side.
Revolutionary love is not an all or nothing metric. It is an aspiration. Just the aspiration is revolutionary enough. It's hard. Van, you always say, when it's hard to love, love harder. It's hard. I remember sitting and writing at a cafe when I heard the words "sand nigger," the table next to me. And I looked over at that group of men, those five white men, older men, and I just wanted to say bigots and leave that restaurant. And I had to tell myself to see them like, you are part of me I do not yet know, right? So how can I see everyone, sister, brother? So I looked at that table and I said, uncles, 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 you are my uncles. And I walked over there and I said, people have been killed in my family to that word, and I need you to know what it means to me. And at first they were so defensive, and I said, I could have just seen you as bigots, but I saw you as my uncles, and I need you to see me as your sister. I need you to see me as your daughter. And that is when it began to shift a little bit, just a little bit. It was an imperfect conversation. You'll have to read the rest of it in this book. But something happened. A seed was planted there that as long as they were moving through a world where they saw subhumans who were out to get them, that would cut them off from their own capacity to love. Their suffering is not equivalent to mine. But once I could see them not as monsters or bigots, but as people who are suffering, who don't know how to grieve the notion that the nation never belonged to them in the first place, then I could begin to think about, okay, what do we need to do to reach them? And brother Van, you've gone to places. I saw how much you had to take after you did your work with the coal miners. I was thinking, Prophets for Love, it's never been popular. It's always been dangerous. So the fact that you had arrows coming at you from all sides, it means that, you were walking that difficult path that all of these spiritual leaders and social reformers have had to walk before us. And I'm just so grateful that I get to walk it alongside you, because you make me brave. We don't go to battle alone and we don't give birth alone. We need each other. And I'm going to leave you with this last metaphor that has been really helping me right now. Just going back to the birthing labor, that birthing metaphor. I keep thinking, if we think of progress as linear, then between this pandemic, 120,000 people dead, disproportionately Black people, deaths that were preventable. How many more people, how many more Breonnas and George Floyds, how many more? If we think about progress as linear, then we are sliding backwards into darkness, no matter what happens in 2020. But progress and birthing labor is cyclical, not linear. If we begin to think of the story of America as one long labor, then every turn through the cycle, it feels like 1968. It feels like 1992. But every turn through the cycle opens up a little bit more space for liberty and justice than before. It gets us a little bit closer to what is wanting to be born. And here's the truth. I don't know how many more turns through the cycle it's going to take. I don't. And when you're in birthing labor, you don't know when the baby's going to come. You just got to keep breathing and pushing and doing your part in the middle of the cycle and your moment in history to show up to the labor with as much bravery as you can muster. With your mother, my mother's here, with your mother, your midwives by your side, your ancestors at your back, your brothers and sisters next to you. And so that's what I want us to be able to do together now, is to seed these pockets of revolutionary love where we're helping each other breathe and push and show up to the long labor. And labor is painful. Labor is painful. And labor is only possible with love.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Valerie. And I believe perhaps one of you can tell us a little bit about the book club that Dream Corps has planned, perhaps Van.
Dream Corps is planning a book club, and there's probably something I'm supposed to read to you right now, but I don't know where it is. So I will let someone else vamp while I figure it out. Team
Van, your team has been busy at work. I know you've been on CNN and you've been talking here and there and here and there and doing amazing work on the front lines. In the meantime, your team has been with me building an amazing community for virtual book clubs. So if you go to seenostranger.com, you have a book in your hand, you get a few friends to have their books in their hands, and you sign up for this virtual book club. And we're planning hundreds of book clubs around the country, and I'll be popping in and we'll be reading together. And we're imagining these book clubs as more than book clubs, right? We're imagining these book clubs as pockets of revolutionary love. So we can be reading together and feeling together and learning together and then breathing and pushing together.
Yeah. That's good. Look, I have to slip off and get ready to actually be on that other place I get to be on screens, CNN. But I'll tell you this, you're never gonna forget this year. And it can go any way you want it to go. We could have 10 American cities burnt to the ground by the summer. by the end of summer and go that way. We could have a white lash where white supremacist organizations mobilize and try to put out this whole thing. We could split it among each other, fuss and fight. But I see a rising possibility that at the end of this year, we could be stronger and better and more beautiful and more prepared than we've ever been. I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot. I've never seen this uprising. I've never seen this awakening. I've never seen this many people at the same time coming to similar conclusions. And it's in our hands. It's in our hands. It's not written. It's not a given. And so what's in our hearts? What's in our hearts? What's in our intention? What we want can come true. Dreams can come, nightmares can come true, and dreams can come true. If nothing else has been learned in 2020, it's that. And that nothing has to be the way that it is. It can get a lot worse, and it can get a lot better. And I appreciate Valerie for giving us a North Star. Those of us are trying to get to a place that's a whole lot better. So I appreciate everybody. Love you.
Thank you so much, Van, for joining us tonight. And Valerie, I believe you have some final words for us.
I just want to thank you, Chris, and thank all of you who've joined us. I've come to believe that that laboring in joy is the meaning of life, that no matter how dark or violent or uncertain, that when we're laboring together, then it allows joy to rush in, and joy is our greatest act of moral resistance. Joy returns us to everything that is good and beautiful and worth fighting for. And being with you all tonight, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know what the next hour will bring, but to feel your energy tonight, and I can feel the joyfulness of being with you, and I hold fast to that. So I thank you, and I want to stay with you. So you go to seenostranger.com and join the book clubs, and that's how we'll stay with each other. And I want to send you off with some music so you can feel that joy in your body. So this is Ani DeFranco has brought together a group of diverse artists to breathe music into this moment. And they've written a song just for us, just for this book, just for this message, just for this movement and moment, called See No Stranger. And so after Chris sends you off with a farewell, then we'll leave you with a song. So stay and just listen to the song with us.
Just want to thank Valerie and Van for having this conversation with us tonight. As Van and Valerie have made clear, Valerie's book is available, See No Stranger. I encourage you all to pick it up and join one of the book clubs. And I'd like to thank all the partner organizations and everyone who helped set up this event tonight, of which there were legion, but it all worked out. And thank all of you, most of all, for coming and joining us. So with that, I will say good night.
See no stranger, let's break this thing open. And distance is danger, so I'll pull you close in.
See no monster, we all come here broken, but love can unbreak us if it goes unspoken.
See no stranger, not saying I'm a savior, but I'm here to show you that open is braver.
See no monster, cause monsters are fiction. Real people are messy, and so is forgiveness.
Each act of forgiveness is such tricky business. Let me hear your story, and I'll be your witness.
Let me be your sister, let me be your brother. Let me see you now
with the eyes of a mother. La 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 la.
See no
monster, just more learned behavior. Under his thick skin is something so tender. See no stranger, no typecast, no token.
See all people as people in motion.
There are no monsters, there are no strangers. There's just a shedding of armor.
It's